Okay, so then Robert, perhaps you can share your slides then. Okay, so the second talk of the day is by Robert Bredereck, who is now based at Humboldt University in Berlin, and he'll be talking about opinion diffusion in non-binary networks. Okay, welcome, Robert.
Yes, thanks. And it's very great to have the opportunity to talk to all of you again, at least yeah, via internet. This is something. Yeah, so I have seen at least one co-author of that paper, so it might be possible that some of the questions could even be answered already during the talk. Otherwise, I will have a look afterwards. Okay. Yeah, so this is a paper together with Lillian and Leon, and it's about opinion diffusion. Okay. Yeah, so our setting is in a social network, and mainly we are interested about spread of opinion, and we want to maximize a certain spread of opinion. The more detailed project goal here is that we have a discrete model of opinion diffusion. So we assume that simply every agent in that network has one opinion about something. Yeah. So and there can be a finite set of different opinions. And the questions we are interested in is first, so what is the maximum possible spread of certain opinion? Kind of an optimistic point of view. So what could happen in best case if you are interested in a certain opinion? And also how many update steps, so how many opinion changing steps are needed to reach a certain stable state with this maximum spread. Yeah, and what is the computational complexity of computing something like that. Okay. So this is a rough overview. I will mostly spend my time here to explain the model and roughly explain what the results are about. There are little proof sketches, but they are mainly there if you have questions. So I will probably not go into any details about proofs here. Okay, so first let me introduce the model. So we have here some agents. They are visualized by these nodes here, and these agents are connected. Yeah, and we simply assume if they have some link, then they can talk and influence each other. And we have opinions, and they are now illustrated in this talk by these colors here. Yeah, so for example, the opinion 1 is illustrated black, opinion 0 is illustrated white, and opinion 2 is illustrated gray. Okay, and somehow what is now expected is in such a diffusion process that somehow opinions converge into clusters. Yeah, so if this was our initial situation or this with 3 opinions, then we somehow expect that this should somehow be the outcome. Yeah, and now there are different models how one could reach that. And we are considering a very simple one of the most simplest probably. And the idea is here to understand some basic properties of this model. Yeah, and our model is as follows. So we assume majority updates. So what does it mean? If you have an agent like this here, then this agent considers the neighborhood. And if the strict majority of neighbors has some different opinion and the same different opinion, then the agent might change the opinion, like this one here. Yeah, also if it's like that, and even if like this would not exist, this is maybe an interesting corner case of our model, only is here. The agent's opinion itself is not counted. Yeah, here still a strict majority of neighbors has a different opinion, so it would update. So as I said, also even if this would not exist. Yeah, however, here's some other interesting corner case. If there is no strict majority, even if like all agents have a different opinion, but somehow there is no strict consistent majority, the agent does not update. Yeah. Okay, and of course, if the agent's own opinion is in the majority in the neighborhood, then the agent also doesn't update. It's clear. Good. So a bit more formal. So what our model assumes is that we have a certain influence network. So this is simply an undirected graph. And we have some mapping of opinions. Yeah. And yeah, we have a discrete set of opinions. I just assume it's numbers between 1 and k minus 1. Okay, and then the next formalism we need is like is this update step. Yeah, and as I said, an agent changes the opinion during such an update step when more than half of the nodes in the neighborhood have the same different opinion. And yeah, so as already seen, this is the opinions I assume for the rest of the talk. Some of the things will be interesting already with 2. Okay, and now you might already wonder whether the ordering plays a role, and this is indeed the case. So to describe such a process of opinion diffusion, of course, we have somehow to model in which ordering agents consider their neighborhoods and consider to change opinions. We simply assume that there is this process is described by a sequence. And it's a sequence of subsets of vertices, and we simply assume that this is step-based. So in each step, the corresponding vertices consider to change the opinion. Yeah, and there are 2 extreme examples. So one is if in every step all agents simply look at the neighborhood and update or not. And the other extreme model, and this is the one we concentrate on in this talk here, is asynchronous updates, where in every step just a single agent considers the neighborhood and might change opinion or not. Okay, and now so that the process ends at the end, we need some concept of stability, and here we call an influence network stable if no vertex wants to change the opinion, meaning that if this vertex is part of this subset, then it doesn't change. Yeah, and analogously, like a sequence is stable if it like leads to a stable network at the end. Okay, so as I said, many things can already be interesting just with 2 opinions. For example, to see that these orderings play a role. So if this is our initial network, then different things can happen. Yeah, for example, this agent could consider majority first, and then this. And we have the all black influence network. It could also be that all agents get the consistent opinion white. Yeah, if this is the update ordering, but also something in between is possible here. Yeah, so if first this vertex here updates and then this and then this, then we have this as a stable state. Yeah, so now no vertex wants to update anymore. Okay, so I will briefly discuss some related work, like in the larger fraction or like a little bit further related. There is so much work I couldn't discuss here, so I would have to fill the whole slot just with related work. So that's why I concentrate here only on the most related work, namely related to the question whether this process converges in few steps and with also discrete updates using majority update model. So first, what is known already since quite some time ago, a sequence of synchronous updates always converges either to a stable state or this cycles around between 2 states. Yeah. The number of synchronous updates is bounded by number of vertices square. Yeah. And this bound is even tight. Yeah, so it might be that it really takes a quadratic number of steps until such a network stabilizes. Also, some complexity results are known. This is all still for just the binary case. Yeah, so it's NP hard, for example, if you want to decide whether there exists some initial assignment for which it takes only a certain number of rounds to converge. Yeah, and maximizing, however, the spread works greedily. Yeah, and this is a good thing. If you're just interested in the main question of this talk, then you can do this quickly. Yeah, there's one more thing, namely, one can also efficiently identify a set of number of vertices half agents that can lead to a consensus quite quickly. However, it might be possible that the consensus could be reached even quicker. This is then again NP hard. There's also some related work on the non-binary side. Yeah, for example, here, and I will come back to this in a second. If you consider greedy spread maximization with more than 2 opinions, then one can show that this fails. This fails already with 3 opinions, and it's computationally hard to compute this spread maximization. Yes, and deciding existence of a sequence leading to a consensus is also NP hard. Yeah? Just 3 opinions are required. Okay, and as I said, there's much more work further related. For example, there are much more complicated update rules and opinion models with preferences. And here are several people in the room that can answer questions with respect to that. Okay, so the first thing, what is with binary sequences? So how does spread maximization look there? So in the binary case, we have a very nice situation. If we now consider sequences which we call optimistic, yeah, and also the analogous thing works if you are interested like in the spread minimization, which we call now pessimistic. Yeah, then what one can show is that one can compute a corresponding sequence, yeah, that maximizes the spread of the opinion in polynomial time, yeah, and this sequence is asynchronous, yeah. Also, synchronous sequences or some mixed sequences wouldn't help. It's relatively short, and yes, every vertex changes the opinion at most twice. This is also one nice property. And actually, there is no other outcome in a certain sense. There may be different sequences that lead to the same maximization of the opinion, but the final outcome is the same for all of them. Yeah, and the algorithm to find the sequence is very simple. So you do the obvious thing. It's a discrete thing. You first change the vertices in favor of your favorite opinion. You do this until this is not possible anymore. Yeah, vertex by vertex in arbitrary order, and then you change the other vertices you have to change to reach stability. And showing that this is the case can be easily done by an exchange argument if you compare with an arbitrary other optimal sequence. But I will not go into detail here. So this is the situation for binary opinions. Now, what happens if we add a third opinion? Yeah, so just 3 opinions now. The bad thing is now this nice structure doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, so it can now be the case, namely that that one has to give up a certain agent. So assume here we are interested in maximizing this black opinion. Yeah, and now what we could now do, for example, this vertex here is not stable. It would update to gray. Yeah, but we could stabilize it by, for example, updating this vertex here to opinion white. Yeah, then we have saved this. However, as soon as we do this, there is no way we will lose these 2 black vertices. Yeah. However, we could do something different here, namely we can also give up this vertex here and simply update its opinion to gray. Yeah, and then we can rescue the other 2. Yeah, so now the situation is much worse, and those things can, of course, appear multiple times in a network, and decisions of how to spread the opinion are difficult now. Okay, and what we were now interested is to understand some basic properties of this model after like adding a third or more opinions. Yeah, and the first thing we looked at is at the length of the sequences. So how long does the process of opinion diffusion take? And the good thing is there is some upper bound, which also holds for the binary case, namely that the opinion diffusion process cannot take longer than number of edges times. And this still holds. Yeah, one can translate the upper bound result from the binary case to the k opinion case for arbitrary k. Yeah, so that's good. So it's finite, at least the process, and it's not super long. And the proof works by a relatively straightforward edge potential argument. But as I said, I will not go into details here. One more thing one can now look at is at sequences that that are short but also end soon. Yeah, so what are the shortest sequences? And here we can show that one can compute such a stabilizing sequence of linear length, yeah, in also relatively short time. So if k is a constant, then this is linear time. Yeah, here we are not interested in spread of opinion. We are just interested in any short process that ends in a stable state. Yeah, this is also possible still quite quickly. Okay, and now the question is, what happens, for example, if networks are simpler, for example, in acyclic graphs? Yeah, so how complicated can the process be there? And here we have already quite negative results. Namely, what can happen in acyclic graphs is that a single vertex may update an unbounded number of times. Yeah, so roughly proportional to the number of agents. Yeah. So here I have some gadgets, but I won't have time to go into details here. So the interesting thing is here, what's going on here is one has a lot of black vertices here, and to somehow rescue them, this middle vertex here has to change opinion many times. And such things can even be necessary for acyclic graphs. So this is the first bad news. And now the question is, how long may spread maximizing sequences be at least? Yeah, so what is the lower bound when we have more than two opinions? So recall that with two opinions, we have always an optimal sequence with just 2 times number of agents, many steps. But with 3 already, we get a quadratic number of updates in worst case. Yeah. So the construction is relatively complicated. I just show you here a very small excerpt. So what's going on? There's a lot of missing in a graph. So there will be an update sequence where agents update in a snake-like manner. Yeah. So as I said, this whole thing is more complicated, but one can show that one can build graphs like that, and one can append a lot of gadgets over there with also some black vertices, and then such a sequence has to be followed, and this is quadratic number of updates in this network. Yeah. So spread maximizing sequences can be relatively complicated already with 3 opinions, and it wouldn't me if I wouldn't have looked at parameterized complexity. And finally, what we also looked at is the computational question. So in how many computation steps can we somehow compute spread maximizing sequences? And here I also have relatively negative results. Now, this is a pretty strong statement here, because what we were able to show is that computing such an optimistic update sequence in a network with just 3 opinions is NP hard. It's also W2 hard with respect to sequence length. So that means even if we know that the sequence is relatively short, it doesn't help us much. Yeah, and these complexity results hold even if we just have 2 vertices of our favorite opinion. Yeah, and initially also just 3 vertices were unstable. This is an excerpt of the graph. Details here are not important, but you can see there are just 2 vertices of our favorite opinion here. And initially everything is stable except of these A vertices. Yeah, and to stabilize them, they somehow, let's say, infect others to be unstable, and you finally have to solve a set cover instance to rescue these two vertices. Yeah, so quite bad news if you are interested in spread, in the maximum spread of some opinion. So let me quickly summarize here. So what we have seen is that for non-binary opinion diffusion, maximizing the spread is not possible in few steps, and it's not possible in few steps. We have shown in like different manners. Yeah. So one is that if you just look at the sequence length until you maximize your spread, this might now need a quadratic number of updates, as opposed to the binary case where this is just linear. Yeah. So these spread maximization processes are more complicated. Even acyclic networks do not help. Yeah, so their single vertices may even update unbounded number of times. This is also not so nice. And computing the spread maximizing sequences is also not possible in few computation steps. This is complexity result. Yeah, so if you want to summarize it even more, it means that if you add a third opinions, then things get dramatically more complicated in this model. Yeah, and so what's future work? Of course, we have only looked at a few specific graph classes. Yeah, so we would actually hope to find some structure in graphs that makes the process maybe more simple. Yeah, but there is not super much hope, at least if you do not additionally consider the opinion structure as well. So just the graph structure, I have not much hope. Yeah. So for example, what we have shown is that degree at most 2 graphs are still easy, but with degree 3, we already get NP hardness. Yeah. One interesting open case is a case of acyclic graphs for the computational complexity question. So this is still open. And of course, yeah, other parameters.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. So again, I suggest that we unmute our microphones for applause. We're running a little bit late, but we do have time for some questions. And so far, I see one question in the chat from Bootsvicker. So Robert, will you take that?
Yes, let me have a look.
Could I add something to this question?
Sure.
A special case would be you only have 3 opinions, but they're on a one-dimensional spectrum. The left is not influenced by right people, only by center people. The center can be influenced by both. I think it's an interesting question as to whether that would fall closer to the binary situation or to the situation of more than 2.
Yes, yes, indeed. We have started to look in these directions. So what I can say is that some things become different. Yeah, for example, if you could have some middle ground opinion that, yeah, that would be influenced. For example, yeah, if you think of numbers, that that the update process goes rather to the average opinion and not just to the majority. I think this is very interesting. Yeah, but we have just some initial thoughts so far. Okay.
Then this question by Umberto.
Yes, generalizations. I think most of the results will hold for like other threshold functions as well. I couldn't put my hand for that all will hold, but I think most things will hold. Yes.
So we have a question about real-world phenomena.
Yeah, real world. This is a very good question, and yeah, I would also like to answer this. But I think what we are here doing is so far to understand the processes themselves, so that we like at the end know the properties certain models have. Yeah, and then we can try to adjust the models so that the models simulate the real world. And then this can help us to answer questions. This is like a fundamental first step. Yeah. So first we have to understand the properties of the model, and then we can see whether we can somehow simulate real world scenarios with this. That's another.
Going on, weighted graphs.
Yes, weighted graphs. Ooh, that's interesting. Edge weights. Yeah, we haven't looked yet. Weighted but binary, yes. I would guess it's probably not super difficult then. Oh.
So convergence is known, but I don't know about the other things. So
yeah, spread maximization.
That's the Hopfield. That's the Hopfield model.
I think the spread maximization itself should probably also work, but other questions could be influenced by weights. That's right. It's an interesting question.
Okay, and perhaps the last one, probabilistic updates.
Oh yes, certainly this is worth to look at. This is not my core expertise. Yeah, but yeah, certainly having good models for this would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks, Risha, for the links. Okay, so I suppose, right, so it's again been more than 30 minutes in the start of the talk. Thanks everyone for the lively discussion. So let's stop here, unmute again for another round of applause for, well, both Robert and Markus. And thanks everyone for showing up. Okay. Before Dominic disconnects us, let me advertise the talks 2 weeks from now. So there will be a session hosted by Piotr Filashevsky. So we gave him the power to select 2 speakers. So he invited, I believe, Oskar Skipsky and Elliot Anshulevich. And I'm really looking to the session. So there will be some interesting talks. So that's 2 weeks from now, meaning December 17th. Right, and then we'll break for the holidays and start again in January. Okay, so that's all from me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.